From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Stop touching it.
You've got a tip from Melissa? What that lady said about what that guy said about what that other guy said. A little known fact about a well-known case. Why you still haven't deleted your MySpace account. Tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. She never borrows trouble unless she can pay it back with interest, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Well, I'm all about the no interest loans at this point in my life, producer Mark.
Like for trouble?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
so I would borrow it but return it. And not, I'm not. Here's the thing: I'll borrow it. I'm not paying your fucking interest. How about that?
Okay, well, you know, when you pay back trouble with interest, that's probably going to hurt somebody.
Oh, right. So I think I'm doing both of us a favor.
It's a nice thing.
I'll borrow your trouble. I'll give it back. But you can't charge me interest,
right?
So,
and you'll have just as much trouble as, but not more than you had it.
Right, you'll have the same amount of trouble when I give it back, but you won't have more. Yeah, that's good. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. That's good. I'm glad we worked that out. And the reason I haven't deleted my MySpace account is because Tom would be so hurt.
Tom, you got one friend on MySpace.
Mm-hmm.
Good old Tom.
Yeah, I always wondered if he was real or if he was like some weird thing, built by the MySpace machine,
just to keep things going.
Yeah,
that was an interesting venture. The guys that invented it, I think it was a big firm, like it was a big company that bought them, and as soon as for like hundreds of millions of dollars, and then it just
tanked.
Facebook came along, and there it went.
Yeah, Facebook, which is basically where I live my life, but was originally for college-age boys to hit on college-age girls,
which is still used for, but it's used for so much more.
It really is, and you can talk shit about Facebook all you want, bitches. I don't care. It is not my political playground. It is the place where I get to talk to people I don't talk to every day, and I am grateful for it. So you can say it's run by monsters and Mark Zuckerberg should be drawn and quartered. I don't give a shit. You're about your opinion. Keep it to yourself. You go fucking hang out on, Instagram, which they now own too. Go hang out on Snapchat. They probably own that too. I don't give a shit. Go hang out on Tumblr or Grindr or whatever the fuck you people hang out on. But I love Facebook. Sorry, not sorry.
No,
Hashtag,
you don't need to be sorry. That's
I don't.
All right.
I don't.
I don't. As you know, I have my own Facebook account where I don't talk about politics at all. I just talk about life and
exactly. That's what I don't want to get into fights with people on Facebook. What I want to do is find out information that I don't have, get to know people that I don't know that maybe broaden my horizon, and keep in touch with the people I do know. It's a lovely thing. And there are absolutely other ways to do it and even other platforms, but I don't care. I'm just going to be just fine with Facebook. If it goes away like MySpace, which eventually it probably will, I'll find something else.
Right.
But in the meantime, I'm just going to say I'm grateful for Facebook.
I think the message is use Facebook however you like, however you want.
But don't tell me how to use it. Or don't tell me how bad it is that I use it. That's the thing I think that bothers me.
I didn't know you ran into that.
Oh, my God. Daily someone is saying, I'm about to delete this. Well, then go.
Yeah.
Do you need to announce your departure? This is not the airport. We don't need to know your fucking departure date and time. Fucking go.
Those are the people who want to talk politics that don't like Facebook for whatever reason.
Well, or they're just angry curmudgeons who want to argue with you, no matter what your political...
That's right. There are people on Facebook that would argue with you, even if they banned politics forever from Facebook. They would argue about...
Right.
It's like, oh, man, I just had the most delicious strawberry ice cream. There'd be 10 people going... No, you didn't. Yeah, no, you didn't like it.
This one's better.
Yeah. Why are you eating strawberry ice cream? What are you saying? What are you really saying?
People are allergic to strawberries. Yeah. And you're blatantly shoving your fucking strawberry shake in their face.
Do you know how many people around you are allergic to strawberries while you're eating
it in your home? Yeah. Oh, on the other side of your computer screen.
And you own a dog, and if your dog licks that ice cream, she's gonna die.
That's right. They're all gonna die.
You're a monster.
Okay, stop it. Now I'm having PTSD about social media. Please stop it. I'm breathing. All I'm saying is I'm not going to get in a fight with you on Facebook, and I know most of the people listening are not going to fight me on Facebook, but I am grateful for Facebook and for other social media platforms too, but definitely for Facebook, as it's where all the old people hang out, and I'm real comfortable with the old people. So I wanted to say thank you to MZ Extended Lettering for her wonderful review on Apple Podcasts. And she likened producer Mark to the cherry on top of the true crime sundae. So you know that I would call him the nut on top of it.
Hey.
But, yeah.
Okay, I guess that's accurate.
Thank you. But it's very sweet of her to call you the cherry on top of the true crime sundae. And if you say that the podcast is like any form of ice cream, we are very grateful. If you could take the time to give us a review on Apple Podcasts, we are also grateful. If you could give us a 5-star rating, that is a lovely thing too. But sitting down, taking the time to write a review is a huge gift to us, and it's free. And we are really happy about the people that have taken the time to do that. And we need those because apparently the ratings and reviews help other people find you, and we could use some finding. I will say things are getting better for most podcasts. The spring of the pandemic has been pretty dismal. You would think listenership would go up, but it did not happen. And I'm gonna guess it's the commuting equation. Most people listen in their cars during a commute, and you're not commuting from the bedroom to the office down the hall or whatever.
And you've got your family constantly there demanding your attention all the time.
Right. Yeah, but we're crawling out of the mire. January was a great month. February was really good. March started to feel the hit. April was dismal. May we were crawling up, and now June we're getting back to almost where we were. And I'm just really grateful for any of you who listen, and tell 17 of your closest friends that you listen, and maybe they'll like it too. You never know.
I think that's a great idea. and if I may just quickly remind the tipsters out there about Patreon. We've got a Patreon page if you would like to visit it. It's not necessary, but if you feel like chipping in a couple bucks here and there, just go to patreon.com/justthetipsters. And there's stuff that, you can get stuff from us.
We do. We have some new swag, some new shirts, some new hats, and some new holographic stickers that are beautiful. Some new keychain charms that I'm going to be assembling with a defensive stick that's got rippled grips for your hands. It's 5 inches long. You keep it in your purse. It really comes in handy if you are walking to your car by yourself, for some sort of protection. But it's also if you're in some sort of a car accident and you need to get out of your car in a way that isn't convenient, it breaks the windshields. So
that's very cool.
I was pretty excited when I saw those. And
wow.
Yeah.
So if we don't have them in yet, but if you become a patron.
No, they're supposed to arrive tonight.
Oh, there you go. So if you become a patron, if we just don't happen to have it yet, just tell us that's what you want.
Yeah.
And when they come in, you'll get that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm really excited about those things very much. And I wanted to thank the newest subscribers on YouTube, which I constantly forget we have a YouTube channel. So thank you for listening, the ones who listen there and who subscribe. So I wanted to talk about this earlier, and I believe that the Baton Rouge Serial Killer series is going to probably be a 4-part series now, just because of the way things are being laid out. And I will explain why it probably needs to be a 4-part, because this is part 2, and part 3 is going to be a really wonderful thing, which I'm excited to tell you about. But before that, I want to talk about a couple of podcasts that I adore. And I am quite a picky bitch, and I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because most of them suck donkey cock, or they don't appeal to me in a way that, I want them to. And or it's just not an interest of mine. And there are over 1 million podcasts now. And I had heard a stand-up comic say that there are 5,000 podcasts on cycling. And he's probably right, like how to pick the best seat so your testicles don't get smashed or whatever. You know, everyone has, that's what's so beautiful about the universe. We all have different interests. And there's a podcast for you.
5,000 on cycling?
I think he was just kind of pulling a number out of his ass. But when we found out that at the beginning of this year, there were over 1 million specific podcasts.
Amazing.
1 million.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm. When we started this 2.5 years ago, there were 400 to 500,000. So it has doubled in 2.5 years, doubled. And there were already a lot of them. And I always thought most of them were true crime podcasts, but it turns out most of them are gaming and live action role playing or something like Dungeons and Dragons podcast.
Wow.
I don't even get it. Don't understand. It seems like a very visual thing, but God bless the podcasts that get, these huge numbers of people listening. It's a beautiful thing. That's why I'm trying not to sound too pushy about ratings and reviews, but that's how people find us. And I think people need to find us because I think what we're doing is one of the loves of my life. And the more people that know, I think the better outcomes there'll be. And we have a couple of cases coming up, a couple of interviews that they're really asking for our help, and I would really love to give that to them. So the couple of podcasts that I adore may be a little too inside baseball for most people, but if you're any kind of a murder nerd like me, you might love them like I do. So the first one is called Dead Men Do Tell Tales, and it's two beautiful young girls, Jordan and Nicole, and they're both pathology doctoral students, I think in Northern California, somewhere in the Bay Area, and they want to work in the field of death investigation. And they are, smart and funny, but not irreverent. And, they're these interesting nerds who are in school, and they, do interviews, and some of them are, like I said, a little maybe inside baseball, but it's still fascinating to me, the people that work in the death investigation field. But just for instance, one of my favorite episodes was in December. They did like a Christmas episode, and they talked about the myth of all the people dressed as Santa that were, ended up stuck in chimneys. It's really not a thing. It may have happened once or twice, but they really couldn't even find any true instances.
Well, that's disappointing.
Yeah, I know. But it's like, that didn't happen. But they did find like 15 instances of people getting stuck in chimneys for the strangest reasons, like mostly, for robberies. But it's like, don't do it, kids. You think you can fit in there. And typically they take a turn. The flue needs to be much more narrow to centrally locate the smoke to rise it up through the chimney. So you're gonna get in there. It's not gonna be good.
It's not a straight tube.
That's what everyone thinks, and that's what I would think too.
Yeah,
I
that
just
makes
didn't
sense.
know. Yeah, I didn't know how. I didn't think of it. I just thought it was straight up and down. I didn't realize there was different turns, like sometimes a 90-degree turn.
Wow!
I
didn't
know.
know that.
I had no idea.
So it directs the smoke. That makes sense. It does make sense.
It's still kind of a mystery to me, but I did think the fact that they chose to discuss that was very interesting. And a couple of the cases were people who had maybe had issues in their love relationship and tried to break into their, ex's homes and got stuck.
Oh, well, those people deserved it.
Well, one woman was an internist. She was a doctor, and her boyfriend had broken up with her, and she tried something else. I can't remember what it was, but it didn't work out. And then she tried to get into his home through the chimney. And she, if you find a way to survive in there, you can do it for a couple of days if there's a water source, because you can breathe. But, people die of something called, positional asphyxia, like if you're, trapped and you're compressed, and that would be a long, slow way to die, I would think. But I'm
getting claustrophobic just thinking about it.
I know. One was a man who was trying to break into a home, and the homeowner, at that moment, decided to light a fire.
Oh.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Oh,
and he
boy.
and the homeowner here screaming, and calls the police, and there's the guy trying to break in his home. There was one, it was Citrus Heights, actually, the home of Joseph James D'Angelo. A frequent customer at a bar tried to break into the bar through the fireplace on Christmas because it's like Miss Vicky's Outpost or something. Miss Vicky had put the employees' tips into stockings along the fireplace. So you go to this establishment, quite frequently. You tip, and then you try to break in through the fireplace, the chimney, to steal back the tips you've given them over the year, I guess.
I have a feeling that a
cocktail was involved.
Well, what they served there at
Miss Vicky's Outpost. I just made up that name.
Yeah, whatever. I think that may have something to do with it because only somebody who's had a little too many tipples would think that you could do that.
Yeah, get in and try and get the,
I got an idea. Listen to this.
Yeah, I'm going to climb up on the roof. I'm going to go down the chimney and get my money back.
And then it's like, no, George, you really ought to do it.
Yeah.
No.
You trust me. Yeah. I got this. Yeah, it sounds really well thought out, well planned, just like wonderful. And now what happens nowadays is that if you are doing this for the most part, several people who have survived it have been able to reach their cell phones and call and say,
oh, wow.
By the way, I was trying to break in here and I'm stuck. Can you come and get me? And then arrest me? Yeah. So God bless the cell phone for that.
Wow.
I know.
So what's the name of the podcast again?
It is called Dead Men Do Tell Tales.
That sounds interesting to me.
Yeah. And the other one is called the Double Loop Podcast. Now, Glenn and Eric have been doing this podcast since 2013. And they have over 200 episodes. They're like these crabby dudes who are kind of like brothers who are constantly sniping at each other, but they're still somehow respectful. And they're both fingerprint analysts, and they have guests that are kind of experts in the latent print world, and I just love them. So Dead Men Do Tell Tales and the Double Loop Podcast.
The Double Loop.
Yeah, that's the circles on the fingers for fingerprints.
Oh,
they're called
okay.
double
See,
loops.
there you go.
Yeah. So they're interesting. Both of those podcasts are interesting in different ways. They may be a little too inside baseball for you, but if you love the details like I do, I think you'll find them both very charming. I really like them. They're well done and they're interesting and authentic, and I hope you'll like them like I do. And if you don't, there's a whole lot of other ones. You got over 1 million to choose from.
Right, 999,998
other ones to choose from.
Yeah.
So the reason that the Baton Rouge Serial Killer series may be extended to a 4th episode is that we are really excited that next week's episode will include an interview with Zachary Police Chief David McDavid. And Zachary, Louisiana is a small community, near Baton Rouge. And honestly, Chief McDavid is kind of a rock star, and he won't admit it. I mean, he's just like, just down to earth. He's like, no, I'm just a guy. And I'm like, dude, you're a lot more than a guy. But so I had mentioned him kind of briefly in last week's episode that he is, nothing is ever done single-handedly. He didn't, run out and tackle Derrick Todd Lee and say, this is your guy. But he's really instrumental in a difficult case that could have gone on much longer and could have been much worse. So I am very excited that he agreed to talk to us, and I'm looking really forward to talking to him because he's quite a hero in my eyes, and I'm, really excited to get to talk to him. And the reason that it may be a 4th episode is that at the same time that Derrick Todd Lee was operating his monsterhood, there was at least a second and potentially a 3rd serial killer in the Baton Rouge area, and that was Sean Gillis is the other one that we're going to be discussing, and I don't know who the 3rd one was. I don't know that he's ever been identified, but...
Well, you're going to have to listen to part 4.
Yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. But so this episode is going to be kind of a timeline of Derrick Todd Lee's killings. And it's going to go, I had mentioned last week, that it's going to kind of go back and forth in time. It's difficult when you have so many things working against you when you're trying to find someone who has probably been working in the area and doing awful things for a lot longer than we will ever know. And because Derrick Todd Lee did not last a lot longer than his final appeal from prison after his indictment, he took, I'm sure, a lot of his information with him. But I feel like I need to start with the first person who was immediately known to be his victim. But time-wise, we're going to find out we have to go back because a person murdered 3 years before this person was tied to him through DNA. So I'm going to start with 2001 because 2001 is when something happened. And I have a theory. You know, the profilers say that serial killers, you know, may kill, may take a cooling off period, may kill, may cool off for longer than we imagine. And something might happen in their lives. They call it a stressor that makes them then become much more prolific. And that happened with Derrick Todd Lee. And I think what happened was he ran out of money. His wife had gotten a large settlement that they'd blown through. And he was, you know, drinking heavily, becoming much more violent at home with his wife and his kind of common law girlfriend, who he had children with both of them. And we'll find out that the son he had with his girlfriend, Cassandra, he ended up in a bad way in 2019, I think. So in 2001, Gina Wilson Green is found strangled in her home on Stanford Avenue near LSU. She was raped and strangled. She was 40 years old. And I will tell you that I have pictures of all of his victims that are known, which at this point there are 8. I have pictures of all of them, color pictures, and they are, each and every one of them, beautiful and brunette. Apparently he had a thing for brunettes, which was one of the things profilers picked up on. It's not hard to see. He had good taste for a terrible, monstrous human being, good taste in beautiful brunette women. And Gina was 40 years old, looked much younger than her age. And when they found that she, you know, was not showing up for work and they showed up at her home, they found that her cell phone and her purse were missing. Now, they were able to get DNA that was sent to the Louisiana State Crime Lab and held on to, because at that point they didn't have anything to run it against. So because even though Derrick Todd Lee had been arrested numerous times, he slipped through the cracks, as we know, many more times than he should have been given an opportunity to. There's pieces of information in this episode that bother me so greatly because he could have been stopped before.
I mean, even more frustrating in part 1, because that had me going.
Yep.
Man.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Found out some more stuff that just... Yep. So the cell phone belonging to Gina Wilson Green was found about 3 weeks later in an alley on Choctaw Street, not far from her home. So he kept it for a while and then got rid of it. And we know that serial killers that keep trinkets typically hold on to them, but maybe something about this one made him think he needed to get rid of it. So I'm going forward again until I get to the year where the first case, or one of the 2 first cases, is connected. So in January of 2002, so we're about 4 months away from Gina Wilson Green's murder. This is January of 2002. Geraldine DeSoto, 21-year-old, beautiful brunette who was an LSU student. She was going to graduate in the fall of 2002. She's found in her home by her husband. Now, he was the lead suspect, as would happen. Typically, when a spouse gets murdered, it's usually someone in the inner circle. So he was the lead suspect for quite a while. But they took DNA evidence and found it related to Gina Wilson Green and knew that Darren Soto did not kill Gina Wilson Green and his wife, Geraldine DeSoto. So they, had to cross him off the suspect list. But they still don't know who's killed both of them. So 4 months after that, in May of 2002, 22-year-old Charlotte Murray Pace is found by her roommate in her apartment in Baton Rouge. She had just graduated from LSU. She was one of the youngest students to ever receive an MBA degree in business administration. Now, this is tough, but she had been raped and she had been stabbed over 80 times.
Oh, my God.
Now, when a profiler looks at this, they're going to say, oh, this is personal. And what's so heartbreaking is that Derrick Todd Lee was supposed to have had an IQ between 75 and 79. So he wasn't outsmarting profilers. He was just doing the monstrous work that he does and still tripping them up.
Yeah, because you were so dumb that he didn't even know what he was doing.
Yes.
That's rule of thumb in a lot of life I have found. It's the ones that are really stupid that trip up the good guys. And this is the kind of thing that you see here. This guy was obviously just a fucking moron.
He really was.
But he was a monster. And
did what he was going to do, and really should have been caught much sooner. So many more women would have been alive if he had been caught sooner. But he did things he didn't know were going to behoove him. Like, he chose different manners of death. Some women were strangled, some women were bludgeoned, some women were stabbed. One woman was dropped off of a bridge, and he probably fucked up that way because he didn't know that she hit the water, and she didn't hit the water. She landed on land, and they were able to find her quicker. He buried potentially one woman under a bridge, under a tire. She was found. It took 9 months. But anyway, we're going to get to all of those. He did things differently than a lot of serial killers who... He's like the dumb version of Israel Keyes, who, went to great lengths to try and stump profilers and investigators and still got caught because he violated his own, Dexter rules.
Right, because he was too smart for his own good.
Yeah, he was too smart, and Derrick Todd Lee was not too smart, but yet somehow he had many things going for him. Some of it was weather. A lot of it, meaning hurricanes, destroyed some evidence in 2 of the murders. He was, identified as a thin white man with a thin, long nose, long hair, and a white pickup truck. And here's where later on we're going to find out DNA just kicked some fucking ass even back then. So here we are in May of 2002. And Charlotte Murray Pace is actually one of the cases where he was convicted. But he fucked up in July of 2002. Not even quite 2 months later. It was about 6 weeks later. Diane Alexander is in her home. And there's a black male who knocks on her door and asks to use her phone. And somehow he found out that her husband wasn't home. So he overpowers her and attempts to rape her. And he tries to strangle her with her own telephone cord. Her son arrives home and interrupts the attack, and he runs past them, but not before the son can get a look at him. And he's, just so overwhelmed that his mother is lying on the floor in a puddle of blood. But she survives. And 5 days later, she and her son are able to help the police develop a composite sketch. So it's now 2002, and we still haven't gotten to the cases that he did earlier, which I will get to. But it's interesting how this suspect went from being a white male with long hair and a long nose and a white pickup truck to... And I will be honest with you, Diane Alexander and her son described him as Hispanic or Native American. And I'll explain why. They were looking for someone who matched this newer sketch. And they had DNA on the phone cord directly related to this case, the phone cord that he had tried to strangle Diane with. Now, they don't know that the other DNA they have is related to Derrick Todd Lee because he has not been forced to give DNA for any of his felonies in the system yet. So they have these, DNA in the other cases, and they now have DNA directly on the phone cord that was around Diane Alexander's neck. And they send it to a company, which I will explain a little later, and they come back and say, no, it's not Native American, it's not Hispanic, it's not white, he's 85% African American. And they're like, oh,
Well, that changes everything.
okay. They now put out a new sketch. And at this point, I believe that's when Chief McDavid was like, hold up. I think this guy, he had a pool of suspects that, could have been the perp. But I believe that, honest to God, David McDavid is just directly responsible. I can't help it. I'm just going to have to say it. They had a task force. They had the FBI. It's okay. So that's July 9th of 2002 is Diane Alexander, and she's literally the only known survivor of an attack from Derrick Todd Lee. The one thing he did was he didn't leave survivors, and the only thing that saved her was that her son came home. 3 days later, July 12th, 44-year-old Pam Kinnemore is kidnapped from her home. She's beaten and raped. Her husband arrives home, and he finds spots of blood on the bedroom rug. All the furniture is in disarray. Probably a big, struggle ensued, and his wife is missing. And again, no signs of forced entry into the home. Now, I know that they had hypothesized that someone was using a tape of a crying baby, and Derrick Todd Lee said he never did that. And I don't think he was that smart, but I think he was maybe charming enough or just, soft enough looking that in the South, if someone says my car's broken down, and even in the early 2000s, my car's broken down, can I borrow your phone? People with kind hearts would let someone in, and it didn't go well. 3 days later, a survey crew found Pam Kinnemore's body just south of the Whiskey Bay exit on the I-10. She had a lot of defensive injuries, which makes sense considering the struggle in her home, as well as deep cuts to her neck. And they took DNA from her even 3 days later, and it matched whoever attacked Gina Green and Charlotte Pace. So now they have 3 cases tied to him, not knowing they have Diane Alexander tied to him. So he waits 5 months later, and he rapes and murders Trinicia Colomb. She's a 23-year-old beautiful woman who's kidnapped from her Lafayette, Louisiana home, November 21st of 2002. Her car, her purse, her keys, they're all found near a cemetery where her mother was just buried 7 months earlier.
Oh, boy.
A hunter found her body 3 days later in the woods near Scott, Louisiana. Now, she had died from blunt force trauma to the head, but he had left semen in her body, and it matches the Green, Pace, and Kinnemore murders. So now there's 4. The difference between Trinicia Colomb and the other victims is that she's the first Black victim and the first victim outside of the Baton Rouge area that's linked to Derrick Todd Lee. His circle is widening out. He's still in the same area, but he's being linked to other cases. Now, it takes until 2004 before he is linked to another case, which is from 1998, and it's Randy Meebauer. She was abducted from her home April 19th of 1998. There was definitely signs of a bloody struggle in her home, and her body has never been found. But he left DNA at her residence, and it's eventually tied to Derrick Todd Lee.
So, in other words, at this point, they don't have his name yet, but they know it's all the same guy, right?
Yes, exactly. So on March 3rd of 2003, Carrie Lynn Yoder, who's 26 years old, beautiful girl, kidnapped from her LSU apartment sometime between 6 p.m. and 12 a.m. We don't know what ruse he used to get into her home, but he kidnapped, raped, and killed her. Going back in the Quentin Tarantino way of a timeline, there are two other possible victims. One is they're pretty sure is his, even though he was pretty closed mouth about admitting anything they didn't know for sure. But Connie Warner of Zachary, Louisiana, which is where Chief McDavid comes in, was bludgeoned to death with a hammer on August 23rd of 1992. So she was found September 2nd in Baton Rouge near the Capitol Lakes. And there was no evidence because of Hurricane Andrew. There's no evidence left to tie him to her, but they're pretty sure that he killed her. She, was in her 40s. He killed women of all ages, mostly brunette, but people he's able to get into their home. It's a terrible, terrible game he plays, a terrible game. One other potential victim, which we mentioned from the killing fields last week, is Eugenie Boisfontaine. She, lived near the LSU campus in Baton Rouge. She was murdered on June 13th of 1997, and her body was discovered 9 months later along the edge of Bayou Manchac because she was hidden under a tire. A road crew person found her hidden under a giant truck tire.
Oh, okay.
By then, there's no evidence, left that Lee did this. That's why it was never really proven. But if you remember from the television show The Killing Fields, that was the first time I became familiar with Parabon.
Yeah, amazing.
Yes. Now, here's the thing that I found out that just bothers me greatly. The way they found out that Derrick Todd Lee was African American and not a white man with a long, thin nose, or not a Native American man, or not a Hispanic man, was a company called DNA Print Genomics. Now, they started in the early 2000s. They researched and developed and marketed the first ever consumer genomic products, like based on ancestry informative markers. They were able to identify people. It was mostly used for people who were looking for their biological parents. It wasn't even used until later on, by genealogy experts. It was like, if you want to find out about your own, genetic history, we can, help you. It was probably very expensive, but it was the first product marketed ever for forensic genomics and a way to get a physical profile for someone you're looking for. And then it became a tool used by law enforcement. They developed a second form called DNA Witness, which you could figure out a physical profile of someone if they left DNA at a scene. They reached the peak of their revenues like in 2009, where they were making about $3 million a year, but they ceased operations, and I'll explain why. But they make this flagship product called Ancestry by DNA. It breaks down the percentage of ancestry of whoever's DNA you have of the quote-unquote client. So that's how they knew that Derrick Todd Lee was 85% African American. I do believe he had Native American in him, but it was it was largely African American, so they knew they were looking for the wrong person with the tall, thin white man. So DNA print genomics made the first consumer product that was really used for adoptees to try and find more about their genealogy, about health issues. And if you've seen any sort of experiments from Parabon, you know that they can give you iris color, hair color, skin color, these markers to show what someone looks like. It's frightening.
It really is.
It's interesting the way they can kind of age progress and age regress. It's very, very interesting. In 2006, Scotland Yard said that the London version of the Metropolitan Police said that they're going to be using the product DNA Witness to narrow suspects in a really long search for a serial rapist known as the Minstead Rapist. In 2007, DNA Witness helped to narrow down the suspects in the case of Pam Kinamore. So that was what really, in my mind, started to spur, how do we find somebody like Derrick Todd Lee? How do you find someone, and you don't even know that he's connected to all these other cases until you get together all of the DNA samples and are like, this is the same guy. This is the same guy. At that time, it's called, forensic phenotyping, and it's able to give you physical characteristics that, they can draw from whatever DNA is left at the crime scene. And it's being covered in all the major magazines in New York Times and Popular Science and U.S. News and World Report. And there's even an episode on Forensic Files entitled Tight-Fitting Genes, but spelled Genes.
Oh, that's very clever.
I thought it was. I thought it was very clever. There was actually a case in Napa Valley where a murderer saw a genetic portrait that was basically him, and he turns himself in.
No shit.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it does come in handy when you're like, oh shit, that's me. They know. I guess I'll turn myself in. So under the leadership of the CEO, Tony Frudakis, who's a PhD, it became a more consumer product, and it found its place in the marketplace, but he ends up selling it. It was funded by a hedge fund.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The hedge fund that's supporting DNA print genomics liquidates the company and sells all of the intellectual property and how do you do this to DNA diagnostics company just before other companies launch their products. Like just before 23andMe and Ancestry.com kind of take over the marketplace. If they had held on, I think it was just bad timing, but they just felt
Sounds like it.
It just makes me want to cry. But this is the company that came through with the information and provided the forensic phenotyping that caught Derrick Todd Lee. I mean, now we're very familiar with Parabon Nanolabs and what they do, but, DNA print genomics was the first company that said, this guy's not a tall, white, thin, long-nosed, long-haired, white Chevy truck driving fuckface. He's 85% African American, and this is who you need to be looking for. And Chief McDavid said, I think this is the guy we're looking for.
Based on the newly released picture that they released?
The new sketch from the one survivor, Diane Alexander, especially after the DNA phenotyping that gives his actual ancestry, and the shoe leather that Chief McDavid puts into the case because he has, Connie in his jurisdiction, Connie Warner. So we know that Derrick Todd Lee has been operating for a lot longer than we'll ever really know. He probably has a lot more victims than we'll ever know.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm looking forward to the interview with Chief McDavid because I'm sure there's a lot more that went into getting Derrick Todd Lee than we'll ever know. But I'm looking forward to hearing some of it on the next episode. And more cowbell.
And remember, if you'd like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.